Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Welcome, everybody. This is the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I am Darrell Scott. Our guest today, he's a bass player. And don't get me wrong, when I think of bass players, I've been fortunate on this show. Nathan East, Marcus Miller, and we're working on Stanley Clarke. And now I'm going to add Brendan to the list. I think as a fan of music, bass players never stop playing.
Mm-hmm.
You carry the song. You are consistent. But it's like all of you all are like brothers. You all know each other. I'm very happy that, and I'm going to make an assumption here. Stanley Clarke was the person who brought the bass from the background to the foreground, then joined by Marcus Miller and so forth and so on. And there are a bunch of up and coming people. And you're in that in-between list. My top four: Clarke, Miller, Nathan East, and I'm gonna Victor Wooten. But there's, and then you don't think of it because you're not publicized. It is the consistency that you maintain to make sure that song does what it does, that it has a backbone, let's say. And we'll go from there. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Brendan. How do you pronounce your Rothwell?
You got it.
Brendan, welcome to the show. Pardon my glowing regard for you and what you do. But the first thing I want to talk about is you're in Canada.
Yes, sir.
How do you find out about these bass players? Because I don't know, maybe the first question is, what is the jazz scene like in Canada?
Yeah, well, let me begin this with a resounding thank you on many levels. The bass player fraternity is actually a pretty cool place to be. It's a very non-competitive place, which is a very healthy thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, to your point, I've had the wonderful opportunity to meet several of those names that you threw out, and all of those names are part of the reason why I do what I do now musically. Mm-hmm. Canada is a physically huge place. So I can probably best describe our jazz scene here as spread out. Like we have distance to travel. You know, the next major city from me is about a 3-hour drive north into Edmonton. If I drive about the same distance south, I'm in Montana, USA. In fact, less, probably 2.5 hours. I'm in Montana. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of, we're very spread out. It's a huge place. We have quite a bit in the east of the country, over in Ottawa, Quebec, Montreal. Those kind of places have a long history of big jazz festivals with serious money and funding, which is always a good thing. Here in Calgary, we're Western Canada, and we're more known for cowboys and cattle and beef and stampede, all that kind of stuff.
Can't play any of those on stage.
Well, not easy. No, not easy. So, the sort of Western and country world of music is huge in this part of Canada as well. Calgary itself, we have a pretty positive, pretty buoyant jazz festival, actually 2 festivals during the course of the year. But Calgary is also a massive energy city. You know, it's similar to Denver or Houston in the US. So oil and gas here is massive, and
Right.
as you and I sit here on a fairly cool morning here in Calgary, of course, we've got all the wonderful mysteries of the Middle East playing out as well. So
Right.
the energy sector is a massive piece of how Calgary survives economically. Um, the music scene, the art scene is part of that. But for sure, you know, we are a huge landmass, and so we're very, very spread out, which does make live performance somewhat challenging from an economics perspective and simply a logistics perspective as well. But we have some great musicians that are in and from Canada that have sort of made their mark on the jazz world over the last 30, 40 years, which is a very positive thing. So we're few in number. Canadians are very, very few in number, but we do fight for music. We keep things going when we can.
So, how did you come across? I always say this. I know, but the listeners don't know. How did you come across wanting to be a bass player? Were there bass players up in Calgary that you followed, or was it just by ear that you heard Clarke and Miller and all those folks? How did you find out about the bass?
Well, a long time ago, before I lived in Canada, I was living in the UK. So my accent gives away, you know, my origins. I'm actually from Yorkshire, up in the north of England. 1986, to give you a really specific response, was the year that Miles Davis launched an album called Tutu.
Yes.
And so I heard Tutu for the first time. And aside from what is going on with that trumpet and how does that even happen,
Right.
the thing that really started to turn my brain inside out was the sound of Marcus Miller.
Hmm.
And so up until that point, I'd been a classically trained child musician. You know, I was in
Hmm.
my mid-teens when I first heard this album, and really from sort of 2 years old up until that point, I'd been learning a variety of instruments in the classical world, so piano and violin, and I sang as a kid. I was in a huge cathedral choir, and so it had this classical world going on, which is a wonderful grounding in music. But then I heard this sound, and I thought, well, trumpet's cool, the keyboards are cool, but that bass thing, that's something I don't yet understand and need to.
Right.
So that was really the catalyst for me with a bass. I didn't own a bass when I first heard Tutu. I ended up being able to buy a Hohner, this is 40 plus years ago, a Hohner jazz bass copy. It was probably a horrible quality instrument, but it got me to a point where I could actually make thumb and string and fret
Right.
contact to get the start of that tone.
Right.
So that was the kickstart for me. Was Marcus Miller, and you know, through my late teens and into my early 20s, I kind of stuck with this thing, and I was playing in rock bands and metal bands as well as doing the jazz thing because you know there's only so many notes, right? You just got to do different
Right.
things with them.
Right.
Um, and then I think probably mid 20s was the first time I got a chance to meet Marcus. Um, and you know, they say that thing about be careful when you meet your heroes, right?
Yes.
It's like
Yes. Yes.
actually it was worthwhile because he's
Right.
one of the
Yes.
most grounded, loving humans that you'll meet.
Yes.
And he's Marcus Miller. So it
Right.
was a very, very cool thing. But that was the kickstart for me. And obviously from there you sort of widen your listening net and you get into the Stanley Clarke world, which then brings you into the Chick Corea world and all the things that have happened with that and the fusion stuff and drummers like Dave Weckl and guitarists like Frank Gambale. And your brain just is absorbing all this stuff. Fortunately for me, at still a relatively young age back then, where you can absorb and learn and try and bring that into your own playing. Um, but it's a long journey, and I'm I'm 40 years into playing bass this year.
So, considering the various styles, and like I said, I've been fortunate to talk to Marcus and Nathan. He's looking to talk to Stanley somewhere in the next 6 weeks or so.
Mm.
How do you take what they do and then incorporate it into your style or develop a piece of Marcus into the Brendan style?
Yeah, I think early on it probably was that. I think early on when whatever we're doing, learning instruments or learning sport or whatever it may be, part of training has to be mirroring or emulating the things that you hear. So if you're being taught something, the goal is for the teacher to teach the student, and therefore the student has learnt. Check the box.
Mm-hmm.
When you're listening as your mechanism of learning, I think you kind of siphon in and siphon out certain aspects of the playing. And so there are little things that I heard early on that really stuck with me. And I wasn't so much trying to copy them into my sound, but I was trying to copy them when I was learning how to do that certain thing on bass. As you get older, hopefully aside from learning more over time, you also hopefully develop a mechanism in your brain where you're learning differently. And so you know how to do this thing, but the question is now, should you do it? Is it too obviously a Marcus thing or a Stanley thing? And the fact you can do it may be cool, but does it actually mean it's you? And the answer, of course, is no, it's not. You're trying to do it for the sake of being cool because you're 25 and you think it's cool.
Right.
As you develop in age and you develop mentally and your learning abilities change, I think that's where an individual's tone comes through. And so, although I sang when I was very young as a kid, and it was as I said earlier, it was a big deal. It was a big cathedral choir. I don't sing now. I mean, I do a little bit of backing vocal stuff, but I don't sing now because my voice, it changed as a result of singing that much that early on. And so my musical voice now is the bass, although I learned piano and I still play keyboards and I write much of my material on a keyboard, and I learned violin and all these things. But my musical voice is bass, and it's a very specific register within the bass where that thing comes true. And then people do tell me that they recognize my sound, which is frankly an amazing thing to be told.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Yes, we people that have relatively deep voices just don't get me wrong. In sixth grade, no one will believe this except the classmates I had. In sixth grade, I sang second soprano.
There you go.
And then the summer of sixth grade going into seventh grade, there was this thing called puberty. Yeah, I didn't go outside for like 3 months. Let's before we go on, I want to play something of yours that people probably will recognize. Let's play Tell Me. That's Tell Me from our guest today on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. Now, people up in Canada obviously know your reputation, know who you are. Who are the folks in the States that you have played with where people can also find your music?
Yeah. Well, we live in a wonderful time of internet-based communication and internet-based business. So there's a couple of issues around live performance in the US for a non-American performer to do with visas and money and all that good stuff, which we won't waste people's time with today. However, there are ways to deal with that. And so the recording world and technology means I can do all of that stuff from here in little Calgary. So a number of folks I've been able to work with over the last few years. Wayne Gutschall is a US sax player. He's actually down in Miami. Wonderful player, lovely guy. He and I connected first back in 2020. We were down in Carmel, California for a jazz festival. And we met Wayne and his lovely wife, Myrna, and spent some time with them. And our conversations developed into, hey, let's put a track together. So there's a couple of pieces out there on Wayne's online profile that you'll find My Bass Tones on. R.L. Walker, another US-based sax player. He and I did a track, I think it's 2021. The pandemic was a strange time, but it did bring forward lots of opportunity. And more recently, and certainly kind of more prolifically, I've been working with Reza Khan. Reza is a New York-based guitarist, and he and I, we knew of each other. We'd both been putting out music for a couple of years pre-COVID. And then when COVID hit and everybody was, working from home, Reza messaged me and said, "Hey, we're going to do a track with everyone remote." And so we had a drummer down in Brazil, a couple of guys in Europe, Reza in the States, and me up in Canada. And so we put this track together, and he actually quite liked it. And that then spurred some conversation around, well, he's working on an album. He'd like me on a couple of tracks. And so his current album, Mystical, which was released in 2024, Reza gave me 2 tracks to work on. One of those was with the guitarist Nils, was a featured guest. And the other was a track called Language of Love, which did really well for Reza across a number of charts, plus obviously the streaming platforms. And that was really a bit of a kickstart for me because it featured Bob James on piano. Now, I didn't get to meet Bob James. This is all remote, but it is kind of cool to have your name on a track next to Bob James because, the stuff that he hasn't written probably wasn't worth him writing, right? It's amazing. And you think about his work with Foreplay, and it ties into Nathan East and all these things that have been spurring my brain on musically for 30, 40 years. And suddenly I'm on a track with this guy. So that's been a number of wonderful musical relationships and friendships that have developed over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. Reza actually has a new album due to release, I think, in the next couple of months. The title is Shadow Dancers, and that album he actually gave me, I think, 6 tracks to work on, which is a huge step up, and obviously a very positive step up for me. Some pressure, for sure, because you need to be able to say, this is 100%, it's going to be out there forever, because we live in a digital world. I'm on 6 tracks, and then he's got Nathan East on a couple of tracks as well. So, again, the little spheres of influence keep spinning round, right?
It's funny, in all the conversations I've had, it is amazing the connections that you guys have. I can mention a name and it spawns off 6, 7, 8 different names. And then from those 6, 7, 8 different names, there's 6, 7, 8 different more names. And it's just for lack of a better term in my head, it's like a spider web. Spider creates the web, but there's so many tentacles, we'll call them, that relate to different people. I sometimes wonder how, once you reach a certain level, then people are always calling you. How do you have time to answer all those calls, to create your own stuff, to write your own stuff, and I'm not sure, I'll ask this kind of in the middle of all of this. If you're an independent artist, there's so much more responsibilities. It's now a different kind of full-time job because your computer skills have to increase and get better, your communication skills, your marketing skills. Because before, and even if you ever were, when you had that big box record company behind you, you just like to make a phone call and somebody say, "Hey, I need marketing for this. Can you do this?" And they would do it. Now there's no phone call. How do you manage all of this?
It's such a leading question. And every time I talk to guys like Wayne and Reza, the list goes on, right? And all of us are exactly in the middle of that triangle of crazy that you just mentioned, because we're all independent artists, right? We're not a Nathan, we're not a Stanley, we're not a Marcus. And so it's a constant evolution, I think, because if you do something that works once in the digital space, that is not a guarantee it'll work next time round. So you need to be thinking a little bit on your feet. I'm very fortunate, which is different to lucky. I think it's a fortunate piece that I've always had what I call real world jobs. So I didn't want to be a musician that was surviving in this sort of economical climate of, what happens next, right?
Right. Yes.
Because it's tough. Like, it is a tough game, no matter where you are in the world. Music is not something that's going to just give you $1 million for showing up.
Right.
So I've always had that, and I say it's fortunate because what it's taught me, other than what money can do, is about thinking differently and evolving how you think, not sitting back, resting on what you did yesterday that was, a good thing. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure you keep evolving that thinking and developing the principles of how that thing works. So in the marketing space, for example, now we have all the streaming platforms and a
Yes.
massive opportunity there for very small, if any, physical cost, like
Mm-hmm.
money. It's amazing what you can do. And so understanding how leveraging playlisting, for example,
Right.
how sharing certain things on different platforms at certain points in the day or the week, depending on the country that you're trying to target, those kind of things. And really understanding the value of the value of communication. So when you talk with people, how you set up that conversation, what is it you're looking for from that conversation? If you're not looking for something from that person, be honest about it. Simply
Mm-hmm.
help them out, right? And so the Spotify platform is a great example. I spent quite a lot of the COVID year in 2020 pushing my material and doing all the things we were supposed to do back then, which is unbelievably 6 years ago, tagging Spotify as a platform. Lo and behold, August of that year, one of my tracks gets picked up by Spotify and gets put into one of their big editorial playlists. Now, in the contemporary jazz world, that is what everyone's trying to get hold of, right?
Right. Right.
It's great. I'm going to be there for a couple of days, couple of weeks, maybe a month. That's lovely. 6 years later, the track's still in that playlist, and that
Right.
track is now north of 7 million streams.
Wow.
As an independent artist, what does that mean for me, Darrell? It means that that track has actually paid financially for 3 albums that I've released. It's
Wow.
done. So does Spotify pay $1 a stream? No. Does Spotify pay what's right per stream? Tell me what's right per stream. Does
Right.
Spotify pay? Sure. And it's a matter of understanding the mechanism behind that and trying to work with it to develop your brand and develop your presence online.
All right. We'll continue in a minute, but I want to play another track from you. That's interesting. This is The Love on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. Hi there, you're listening to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm Darrell Scott. He is Brendan Rothwell. Uh, the music is good, and I think that that the other thing that we try to do here is to expose people to maybe things they don't hear of. I get Spotify and YouTube and all that sort of stuff, but I'm sure they create a playlist. The playlist is back in the day, you had the top 40 songs, and those were the only ones who got played. But then every now and then, when I was music director at WABQ, Earl Clue's drummer, Gene Dunlap, put out an album because it's just the way
Mhm.
I feel. There's a great tune on there. Being the music director was like, I'm going to play this. But if there are people that never get to where Gene is, then you'll never hear it.
Right,
So how do you my thing is I'm all about the musician.
right.
Yeah, I worked in radio and I did one thing that I'm sure there's still people out there that have cassettes of it. I played at the time there were 6 different versions of Birdland. Weather Report, Manhattan Transfer, Maynard Ferguson, Stanley Turntine did one. There were 6, and at the top of the hour I said I'm going to play Birdland, and I played all 6 of them back to back to back. And granted, they're all different
Right.
between Maynard and Weather Report. It's like, and I'm pulling into a concert one night. Next thing you know, I hear the cassette playing. I'm like, dude, that's great. I'm glad you have it, but it's not good for the musician. It,
Right.
it, it really isn't. So, what And the other thing is this. I'll just go right to this question. You're in Canada. You're playing with Bob James. You're playing with Wayne. Do you have a travel visa? I mean, how much are you traveling throughout the year?
Well, the travel visa item, we touched briefly on it earlier, but into the US is a real problem for any non-US musician. So whether you're from Canada or my origins of the UK or any part of Europe, to attain that particular visa as a working musician is extremely costly and extremely timely. 6 to 9 months right now to process a visa. If you do get it, if you don't, Homeland Security, God bless them, keeps your money anyway. So, a weekend jaunt down to the US to play a couple of shows would probably cost me maybe $9,000. It's not economically that cool. So travel at the moment, really since COVID, has not been that big a deal as a musician because it's not needed to be. And I think if we go back to your days of radio, and it was a golden time when radio was
Right.
truly the thing.
Yes. Yes.
Because yes, whether you were in the US or Canada or the UK, up in North Yorkshire, where I'm originally from, we all had those cassettes. We would listen and we would wait and we would hit record and
Yes.
grab that track and make our mixtape. Well, the 2026 world version of that now, of course, is, as you rightly said, streaming. So whether it's Spotify or Apple or whatever platform people are using. And so, well, traveling and touring for most musicians economically is not high on their list, sadly. Using the digital space is high on, I would say, every independent artist list right now, because the value of that and the immediacy of that is what does it. We put out a track a month ago. It was a single, or kind of one-off release at this point with a vocalist from Miami, actually, Sylvia Bennett. She and I wrote this track last year and put it out literally a month ago. It's north, I think, of 20,000 streams on Spotify already.
Wow.
Now, if I go back 20 years, 30 years to the time of CDs and cassettes,
Right.
I've never sold 30,000 CDs.
Wow.
I've never sold 30,000 cassettes, right? But I do know that tracks of mine are 30, 40, 50,000, 500,000, multi-million streams. And so it's this constant battle and the balance between money, whether it's income or revenue or cost,
Mm-hmm.
and brand. And 20, 30 years ago, money let you build a brand.
Right.
Now, money is separate to brand. You build your brand will develop over time, and it will start to generate revenue, which may be income, it may be offsetting costs, but it's a completely different world. And so having some level of business background for any musician, whether it's through college or whether it's through life and you simply work a real world job as well as being a musician, it's the biggest value add that you can have, second only to your ability on the instrument of your choice.
I can't imagine. When do you have a sane day? Because it appears as though every day is something different. You know what I mean? It is marketing one day, it is composing another day, it is rehearsing a song. Somebody calls you and they need a track, so you have to send it via the internet. Um, th- th- and at some point you have to get out and live life. Um, I I think there are days when I suffer from trying to get guests, um, but it's not me getting a guest versus you getting a guest to play. It is different because now that guest has to go into their studio, they have to play the track or whatever you want them to play. Several times has to get back to you. You may want them to make changes, and that goes with everything else that you have to do. I don't. I've done 130, 140 shows. I am still trying to figure that out.
Mm.
Everybody I talk to, how do you? I'm a time management guy. My wife will tell you I work too much. People I know to say I work too much. I've retired from the full-time thing. I now do this as my job. But you constantly work at it. I tell this story. People have heard this. Every morning, 4 out of 7 days in the week, I'm awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what it is. I just stand. I have a little pad next to my bed and I write stuff down. Whether it's an artist I need to reach out to, whether it's a thought I have, whatever, it's that. I can't imagine. You have kids?
No.
Well, see that's a blessing because you don't have
Yep.
to necessarily worry about that and going to school and all that sort of stuff. But for those of us who have kids who have other responsibilities,
Right.
this is more than a notion. I just I don't know. Okay, enough about my life and my struggles. Let's. What are you working? So what are you working on now? That's on your plate.
Well, a couple of things. One, in the background to all of the creativity piece of music, I'm actually working with Reza on some ideas for marketing of his next album.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of the desk space, computer
Right.
space,
Yes.
thinking brain. Um, I have a little quartet that I'm working with here in town. It's obviously a very local sort of gig at this point, but three amazing local players. We put this outfit together last year. We've done 3 or 4 gigs locally. And it started out, we were thinking about doing some Sanborn stuff. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
cool, because, Marcus and whatever. And it evolved from that. So basically, we're kind of pushing around town with a couple of gigs at the moment, playing kind of 1980s LA
Mm-hmm.
funk.
Right.
You'd love it. If you ever come up here, let me know because you'd love it. It's a
Okay.
great little gig. And then specifically right now, I'm back into writing mode on what I think will become certainly my next release, whether that's an album or an EP is yet to be determined. But what I have learned, and I can tell you this for sure, is that aside from notepads next to the bed and iPads open with things ready to write stuff down, what you really can't do is schedule creativity. I've
Mm.
tried. I've tried
Yes.
putting
Right.
things on a Monday or Sunday morning, or it doesn't work. So you have to wait for whatever's in the wind to kind of make its way through and hit your brain and go, here's the spark, here's the inspiration, and off we go. So I'm fortunate that I can work here at home, have a little studio set up, I have keyboards set up, I can walk in and just play. And suddenly
Mm-hmm.
that's where things start to work on. So really, yeah, to answer specifically, that currently is my main focus is what's the
Okay.
next me project that I'm going to release.
Okay. So, I'm sure we have a lot of listeners out there. They're very glad of this conversation, but want to know how they can follow you, how they can keep up with you, what music you're working on, and whether or not they can download the music that you get. So, what's your social media presence?
Yeah. Well, it's super, super simple these days, as we all know. So I have my own website, which is simply myname.com, so brendanrothwell.com. At the bottom of each page are hyperlinks to all of the things you mentioned. So you can find me by my own name on the streaming platforms. So simply search for Brendan Rothwell. You'll find me on Apple, on Spotify, on all of the above. Amazon, most parts of the world, Amazon carries some inventory of physical product as well.
Mm-hmm.
CD is still a thing. I don't think they ever get played. People just collect them these days.
Right.
Um, and they can also be ordered through my website. But certainly the streaming platforms for the music is the biggest piece. And then Instagram, simply for a keep in touch. It's wonderful to get up some mornings and there's a message from somebody who you don't know who's
Right.
played
Yes.
your music and they send a note and go, hey, simply want to let you know this track means this to me. And I won't get into specifics for obvious reasons, but there's some serious stuff out there, and people go
Yeah.
through good times and not so good
Right.
times, and the power of music. So forget money entirely. It's nothing to do with that. It's the value of how one person arranges 12 musical notes, sticks them in a format that means somebody else who's having the worst day of their life or the best
Mm-hmm.
day of their life can play it and get something from it. That is priceless.
Yeah. All right. Brendan, this I've interviewed a lot of people. There are conversations that you have that are inspiring, that are enlightening. This is one of them. It is great to get to meet you. We will stay in touch.
Sure.
As I say, I reserve the right to be able to call you back.
You have
please let us know whatever news you have coming out. We'll put it on our social media for all of our 90,000 viewers to take a look at.
Thank you.
But I greatly appreciate this. This is always, it's funny, totally transparent here. Sometimes you see a name, you make a connection, but you're, I'll say, hesitant because you don't know anything about the person. I can go out and listen to different pieces of music, blah, blah, blah. We've had conversations in the past prior to getting this all set up. But this, you're going to get sick of me. That's all I'm going to say.
I doubt that.
And if I can get up there, I will. If you can get down here, it's fine. The one thing I've always said is I want to, and I think this would be a great conversation, maybe to get you, Marcus, Stanley, Victor Wooten, Nathan East, all the bass players I know, and I can't think of all of them right now, in a room. I don't want you to play. I just want you to tell stories.
Right.
Because I think that would be one of the greatest things ever, is just to hear the stories. I asked Marcus. Marcus had worked with Al Jarreau, Luther Vandross, Miles Davis, David Sanborn. And I know the other guys relatively well. Some difficult personalities in that group.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Miles. So I look at Marcus and I tell him that. I go, so you've worked with all these 4 people. He goes, how do you do it? He kind of straightens up and goes, Darrell, I'm from New York. And all I can do is laugh because that's how he is. But like you said, he's a very down-to-earth person. He's very nice to talk to. Dude, seriously, I will be in touch. We will keep it. We will keep track of each other. Like, seriously, whatever you got new coming out, please send it to us. We will put it on our social media. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. If you like what we do, if you like this conversation, there are 140 more. Subscribe. You can see them all. You can hear all the nuttiness that we talk about, how much jazz people, jazz musicians and artists are a different breed of people. You are the friendliest, easiest to talk to. Like I said, if I've done 140 of these, I don't have a bad story about anybody that I've ever talked to. And there's a few people I was intimidated by, but they broke that right off the bat. So once again, if you like this, subscribe. Brendan, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, you like this? We'll be back next week with another artist and more stuff to talk about on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I hope you enjoy the stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.